Welcome to Talk Learning with me. I'm Joseph Diaz, an instructional designer passionate about connecting with others and exploring the field of learning and development. In this podcast, we dive into topics like education, learning science, facilitation, behavior change, and other skills related to personal and professional growth. If you're looking to connect with other lifelong learners and discover new insights from talented learning professionals, this show is for you. Today's episode is a special one. I recorded this conversation back in January with two members of our L&D Collective book club, Kamye Hugley and Laura Goldstone. In Q4 of 2024, our book club read Talk to the Elephant by Julie Dirksen, and in this episode, we dive into our biggest takeaways, how we've applied them in our work, and what we learned from our fireside chat with Julie. Since recording, we've kicked off our Q1 2025 book club read, Designed to Engage by Beth Cougler Blom. If you'd like to join, it's not too late. We have another fireside chat coming up on March 11th and one more in April where we'll be joined by Beth herself. I'll leave a link in the show notes for anyone who wants to be a part of the conversation. And on that note, let's talk to the elephant. All right. Well, Kamye and Laura, welcome to Talk Learning with me. I'm super excited to be doing this special episode, bringing in members of our book club and talking about the most recent read, Talk to the Elephant. Super excited to have you both here. How are you guys doing today?
Doing
Good.
great.
I'm doing well. Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. I'm so pumped to be having this chat with you guys. Before we get into talking about the book and all the things that I'm so excited to hear from you guys about, I want to give you guys a second to go ahead and introduce yourselves, share a little bit about yourselves and what got you excited about the book club.
So I'm Laura Goldstone, so happy to be here. My role right now, I am Senior Director of Communications and Head of Content and Brand for a tech company. I've got about 15 years of leading teams and projects in a very multifaceted way, so across all different industries throughout the years. But within the L&D realm, my focus is on the leadership development side, career pathing, strategy and organizational design, workshop facilitation, especially around those soft skills like communication and emotional intelligence. I do a lot of training on content, everything from like accessing the systems to crafting that messaging and narrative strategy. And I love to focus on that culture side of things. And so I love book clubs. I'm a big reader. I have personal aspirations to be a writer as well. So books have always meant so much to me personally. And when we found out that the L&D Collective was going to be running a book club and that Joseph was going to be spearheading this book club, I was just so excited. I love the idea of not just dissecting a book by myself in my own little corner, but like really bouncing ideas off of other people and understanding like how they are engaging with the book and the way that they're uncovering the ideas in there and applying it to their own lives. So I was really excited to dive into this. This book was a fantastic introduction into L&D book clubs for me personally, and so excited to talk about it even more with the two of you.
Yeah, I mean, you have a wealth of experience and knowledge and added a lot of fun culture and insights. And so it was such a privilege, especially over this last book, having you. And Kamye, if you want to share a little bit about yourself as well.
Yeah, sure. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Kamye Hugley, and I serve as a training manager for an education nonprofit. I have been in the nonprofit sector for about 9 or 10 years this year. I got into the education nonprofit sector from being a classroom teacher. I was a public elementary school teacher for a couple of years, and I also taught at the high school level as well. And so in my role at the education nonprofit where I serve as the training manager. And in that particular role, I work very closely with consultants, with about 20 consultants in their implementation of our early learning frameworks. So I support them in being able to train those early learning frameworks for education agencies and public elementary schools and private elementary settings across the country. And so I'm really excited to be here. I am very similar to Laura. I love books. Any reason to buy or read a book, I'm down for it. You can't see around my house, but My husband and I recently moved about 6 or 7 months ago. And part of the decor is books. So I wanted my house to be decorated in books all over the place. And so any reason and excuse to purchase books, I am down for all the time. And so when I came across this particular book club, I was really excited because it was the first time that I ever joined a book club as it pertained to my profession, which is my passion, learning and development. So I was really excited to talk to other practitioners about what they thought about the book and how we can implement our learnings in the various settings that we work in.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I love the background that you bring. And it's fun hearing a little bit more about prior to what you did now, because I used to be a Spanish teacher before getting into corporate learning and development. So it's fun seeing some of those similarities. And I think thinking about why you guys joined the book club, I'm in a similar boat, but also some differences. I love reading, but I've found that sometimes with L&D books for me, I struggle with the accountability, getting myself to finish the books, which is really what pushed me to start the book club. Because instead of saying, I'm going to read this book just because I want to better myself, it was so motivating thinking, all right, I've got Kamye and Laura and all of our other friends who are reading this book too. And like, they're counting on me to have insights and to share. So I don't have as many books around to decorate with like you do, Kamye. I probably should find a better place to put them instead of just sticking them in my drawers. I think I would use my books more if I had them out, but yeah.
Use them as decor. Like, I was really pleased that we were able to figure that out with the designer. So use it as a decor and just put them on different tables and stuff like that.
That's a good that's a good life hack that I need to give a try, is take all the books that I've let collect dust and say, you know what, this is going to be a pretty piece of decor, and then maybe I'll reach for it more often too. But Talk to the Elephant was one that did not collect any dust at all for me. I was just reading through it and looking so forward to all of the chats that we had. And so, I mean, it's been a little over a month since we really finished reading the book. So I had to go back and grab my notes and reflect on what I learned. But I wanted to take a minute to hear from each of you and maybe share myself some of the different insights or takeaways that stood out to you guys from the book. And I guess while you guys think about maybe insights or takeaways, I didn't even introduce myself. So just to share a little bit about my background, I work as a sales enablement coordinator for a company called Vivint. We do smart home and security. And I work doing sales enablement training with our technicians. So the people that go out and professionally install those smart homes. And so for me, as we were reading this book, thinking about behavior change, I was thinking about the different learning and training initiatives that I'm a part of, whether that be creating virtual instructor-led trainings, sometimes creating job aids and things like that to support the work of our technicians. I'm thinking about how can I support them in their behavior change and the busy work that they're doing. So really cool to see, Kamye, you coming from a nonprofit background, Laura working in tech, me working in home security. It was, I think one of my favorite parts was getting to bring all these diverse backgrounds together and just learn from different people's perspectives. But did either of you have a particular highlight from the book or something that you loved that stood out to you that you wanted to talk about?
For me personally, I think something that's at the core of just who I am and what I bring to my work every day has to do with emotional intelligence. Actually, when I was getting my master's in leadership, I took a class in emotionally intelligent leadership, and it totally changed my life. And since then, everything I do, I look at through an EQ lens. And when reading this book, yes, we're talking about designing learning for behavior change, but Julie Dirksen talked a lot about empathy and the emotional intelligence part of that, and looking at things from the learner's perspective and putting the value into their context. And that might even be the systems that you're putting together or the conditions that they need to be motivated to learn. I love that emphasis on understanding their side of things, understanding their perspective, both the emotional side and the rational side. We had to have the elephant and the rider, right? So looking at both of those pieces together and then understanding what motivates that person, not just to take the action, but to want to take that action on their own, right? Like, we want to make it an easy choice for them. We want them to be able to motivate themselves to make that behavior. I thought that was such an interesting way to frame it. And we're always trying to like connect with people and figure out how to engage them. We want to, have positive experiences when we're rolling out content or training on certain topics and things, but really putting ourselves in their shoes, which involves listening to them and getting them invested in the conversations and in the learning process, understanding their values and motivations. It's so much deeper than just, here's some information. Why aren't you doing what I'm asking you to do, right? It's so much deeper for all of us. And understanding that from their perspective can go a long, long way. So I loved how Julie Dirksen talked about that. It was kind of it had its own chapter, but it was also a theme that was embedded throughout the book. So I loved always coming back to that and seeing how everything really related to putting things into perspective for the learner specifically.
To add to what Laura said, in my work, we talk a lot about the thinking brain and the emotional brain. So we talk a lot about, in thinking about the elephant and the rider, how can we support learners to being in their thinking brain all the time? However, Julie Dirksen helped me to better understand that it's okay for us to be in our emotional brain, because the elephant pays attention to different things than the rider. So the rider pays attention to information, facts, and procedures. That's the rider. And the elephant pays more attention to personal experiences, our things that we can sense with our senses, stories, and emotions. And this book really helped me to be more reflective in my practice as a training manager. What are those things that I prioritize in training? Am I so focused on the facts and the procedures that I don't take into account folks' personal experiences, their emotions, and storytelling, and the impact that those may have on the learner as well? So this text definitely put me into being very reflective of my own practice and how I can embed more things that the elephant pays attention to. And another thing that stuck out so heavily to me, I think it's on page 29, where Julie mentions that change is a process, not an event.
I was going to say that next, Kamye. Well, right.
Great minds think alike. And I think sometimes in the world of learning and development, we have, we want this behavior to change, or we want these behavior to start, and let's do this training. And sometimes we think of it as like a quick fix, and not necessarily putting more thought into, is a training what we need? Is it training, or is it something else? Is it culture, expectations? Has a training already occurred? And if so, why are we doing it again? And so Julie helped me to really better understand all those things that go into training outside of just presenting information and facts, and other things that may be going on that may impact the learner.
I think along those lines too, the things that were in the book that helped us figure those things out, there were stories, there was narrative, there was research, and then there were these really great frameworks. I had written down a couple that had stuck with me. There was the change ladder that walked through the steps of a change process. There was the learning journey, just how people learn and all the steps that you take when you're learning something new. And then there was that Kamye analysis that kind of took over, right? The rest of the book that was really at the heart of it. And so having those frameworks was also really helpful for putting all of those lessons into practice and recognizing, okay, it's not just one day. It's not just one meeting. It's going to take some time. It's going to take several different steps. You're going to have to be cognizant of how people are adjusting and what you might need to do at different stages. And there's a lot of analysis involved. So I loved that she was able to highlight the complexity of any type of L&D effort, and then to give us those frameworks was really helpful for making it actionable like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that there was both frameworks of how to apply it, but then the mindset shifts were huge for me, because I was thinking about my notes, and Kamye, you called out I think the same page next to one of my highlights. It was on page 24. She talked about how, and the metaphor might not be a journey, but a garden that needs tending as it grows over time, or a thermostat that needs to be adjusted. And I remember thinking about that was so different for me to think about behavior change as a garden that needs constant attention. It's not just something that happens that, well, I created the training experience, so now the behavior has changed, or I made a resource to solve this problem and now behavior is fixed. But really thinking about that process. And then you guys both talked about there's kind of the emotional and then the logical thinking. And that was something that was a huge perspective change for me, because I think being the learning professional, like I'm naturally just excited to learn and to grow and to change. But then when you're thinking about, well, what about our learners who are busy professionals and who have 32 other things going on, to use the reference that Julie talks about, like they have 32 other things they're worried about as far as getting their own job done. And then we're trying to push change on them from the emotional side or the elephant side of things. That was a huge eye-opening perspective shift for me to think about, okay, am I only thinking from a logical perspective of course this training is going to drive more revenue, or of course this is going to get us more customer referrals, and I'm not thinking about the emotional side of things of, oh, my learners are actually really nervous to put this into practice, or this is really uncomfortable or time consuming, and I'm not seeing it from that perspective because I just made the training. So it definitely gave me a lot more empathy, going back to what Laura was saying about the emotional side. And then it also just helped me think more about how do I cater to both the emotional and the logical side, going back to kind of what you were saying, Kamye.
And it makes me think about what you were saying in regards to, it made me think about values, like what folks value in a training space, because sometimes, as learning and development professionals coming to it, we know what we're supposed to do, what they're supposed to get out of it, but we don't necessarily think about, do these folks even value what we're doing? Not even value what we're doing, but what value have they placed on this particular professional learning? And it was a great reminder that everyone values different things. Not everyone is in that space because they want to learn it. It may be because of compliance or tied to some type of reward, whether that's intrinsic or extrinsic. And so it was just a great reminder to think about what actually motivates some learners and how we can tap into that.
Kamye, that reminded me, like Julie Dirksen talked a bit about how, of course, the value has to outweigh the effort, right? Like we all want to make sure that if we're going to do something, we're going to get more value out of it than we're putting into it. I thought that was helpful, but there was something else, probably in that same chapter that resonated with me. I wonder if it did with you guys too. I'd written it down because it was so eye-opening for me. And it was that the perceived risk often outweighs the actual risk. Like we're often asking someone to do something and we might think that it's really simple, and it might factually be pretty simple, but they might think it's really risky for them to do it because, like Joseph said, they have 37 other things going on, or they have other goals or motivations, like you said, Kamye. So in their mind, they might see it as being risky or difficult or scary or too new to really take that plunge quite yet. So recognizing that it's not just the actual risk, because we might look at that and say, I don't understand. Why aren't people doing what we're showing them? It's so simple. But when we really put ourselves in their shoes and realize, oh, they're perceiving this to be actually riskier or harder than it actually is, then we can design the learning experience with that in mind and hopefully ease that worry a little bit and generate a better outcome.
Because people like to feel like they're good at things, right? Like that threatens our competence when we feel like we're not good at something. So what's actually happening and what we perceive may not necessarily be in alignment.
So true.
Well, and I actually had a note probably from the same section, Laura, that it was on the chapter about calculating value, because you talked about how the value has to outweigh the effort. And she talks about when we're calculating the value, how significant is the reward, and then how immediate is the reward or consequence, how tangible is the reward or consequence, and then how likely is the reward or consequence. And those were really good frameworks for me to reference and think about, okay, I thought that there was a lot of perceived value in this training that I did or this course that I made, but it's not immediate enough. And so I need to either figure out a way to make the reward more immediate or find a way to make it feel more tangible, because like we're not going to be able to drive behavior change if, like you described, Laura, the effort is greater than the value that people are going to get out of whatever it is that we're giving to them.
Feels like a masterclass in psychology that we're using to like help them learn at work. It feels like the fusion of so many different worlds all together.
Yeah, it really was. And then on top of that, so we read and got to kind of take these insights and then bring them to the fireside chats and meet up with other professionals with different backgrounds. That's how we all met, which was so fun. And I'm curious to hear from you guys, what was the most valuable part about collaborating with other professionals, other practitioners in the fireside chats that we had and hearing their perspectives and talking with them?
For me, it was great to brainstorm with folks in that space because I give you a little bit of backstory. So in my role, the organization that I was with, we merged with another company a year ago, January of last year. And so we are doing a lot of updates and revisions to one of our early learning and literacy frameworks. And so, for instance, one of the frameworks is going from 9 PowerPoints and it's being revised to 5 PowerPoints. And so my role within these revisions, I'm not directly responsible for actually doing the revisions. However, I am responsible for providing professional learning to our consultants who will be leading those professional learning sessions. So I have to partner with those folks who are over the revisions, doing the revisions, learn what the revisions are, and then on my end, put together some type of professional learning for our consultants so they can train to these updates. And so I led the first training in November, which was around the time that we had the fireside chat. And so I was like, I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to ask for help because in this particular instance, I'm working with consultants who are experienced educators. Like, these are folks who have been educators for years, have lots of experience. And so for me, I wanted to make sure that I was giving them the information in a way that would make it sticky. And I also wanted to honor their experience. I didn't want to just come in and just tell them, these are the revisions for session 1. These are the revisions for sessions 2 through 5. I wanted it to be a space where their experience was honored, but I wasn't sure how to do that. And so I asked, like, hey, this is my scenario. How can you all help? And that fireside chat was super duper helpful to me.
Yeah. And I remember it was helpful too to kind of, if I didn't have anything in particular in my work, it was cool to hear like you bringing your scenario and getting to hear other people's perspectives, and they were able to share. And I thought, oh, I mean, I'm not doing that right now. Back in November, I wasn't really doing any facilitating like you were. But what's fun is that I am now. I find myself facilitating different training that I wasn't doing then. And I think, oh, yeah, that's something that I got insights from your experience. And now it's helping me out in my work now. So I love too how people with different responsibilities, different organizations were able to share. And then it's like when you take on new responsibilities in your work, you're more prepared for it because of those conversations that helped me kind of open my mind differently.
That too is kind of blending into the general benefits of like the book club and a community like this, where we get to talk through these ideas from the book, but also these situations that we're dealing with in our jobs, because we're all coming from so many different types of roles. We're going to be applying these concepts in so many different ways. And for me, I mean, there's so many benefits, of course, but there's that diversity of thought piece. Like, we could all talk about one topic and we could talk about it for an hour, and we all have different, things to contribute. We'd all take different things away from it. So I really love that anytime that we're all even talking about one concept, we're able to bring so many different colors to it. And for me personally, getting out of my own head, because if I'm too close to a project or an issue that I'm working through, I might overthink it so much that I can't see the forest for the trees right now. I need to get another perspective here. And so having these fireside chats was a great way to work through those ideas with that external influence, like getting those unique, fresh perspectives, broadening the perspectives, the worldview that I have, everybody else kind of bringing their opinions, their experiences to it. It was really, really beneficial, I felt. And like you were talking about before, Joseph, there's that accountability piece too, and that support, because we're all growing together. Like, I feel like a book club is also about growth, because we're not just reading the book and then leaving and it's not resonating with us. Like, this book especially sticking with us, it's resonating with us, we're applying it to our work, we're thinking about how it can help us grow as people and as all the different types of work that we do. So I just think about like the professional development side of it too, even beyond the one job that we might be doing today, or the one way that we're applying it today. That network, that community feel is so important for the fulfillment of our careers too. Like, if I switch jobs, if I start my own company, like whatever might happen in the future, I'll always have read this book and I'll always have these connections with you guys, with the other people in the group. And so we'll always be able to bring that with us. And now any challenge that we face in the future, we're going to think, oh, I got to do my Kamye analysis, or, oh, I wonder what Kamye would do because when she facilitated, she did this, or wonder what Joseph would do. So it's really nice to add to that sphere of our approach and our perspective, and to be able to face future situations just with a little bit more confidence, more color, more perspective.
Yeah, man, I love how you tied that all together, because I was thinking
Sorry,
about
Beautiful.
beautiful, just a mic drop right there. Like you talked about too, the community is powerful. And you mentioned too, kind of what Kamye was saying too, the vulnerability that it takes to kind of come in and say, I'm still learning this. Everybody else is still learning this. I'm not an expert. I just read the chapter. Yeah, help me. And
Yes.
that was something that was super valuable for me, was to come in and say, I think I'm not driving the behavior change I want to. And like, I felt really nervous coming in saying that, thinking like, hey, I worked on this project. It didn't really drive the behavior change I was expecting. And instead to be met with a lot of empathy and support from others to say, hey, we've all been there. We've all had experiences where we put a lot of work into a project and it didn't drive the results we expected. You're okay. I totally feel that. Here are some ideas for next steps. Like, that was super valuable to me. And then Laura, you mentioned diverse perspectives. I think I was kind of surprised and I wasn't sure what to expect, but there were a couple of times where people would strongly disagree on different takes too. They'd come in and I wasn't sure at first how to manage that. And I thought, oh no, I hope people like aren't upset or frustrated. But what was really cool was just how respectfully people disagreed, though. That they'd say, in my experience, that doesn't work, or in my experience, I haven't seen this be the case. And then it ended up still being a really, really productive discussion. And I think it's really cool to see how people are able to come together and share and be vulnerable and talk about, this is what I'm dealing with at work right now. This is what I ideally would like to do. This is the change I would like to drive. Do you guys have any thoughts or insights to help me out? And Kamye, you already alluded to the workshop that you worked on. And Laura, you've talked about some of the work you do with leadership development. One of the coolest things was that we got to actually have Julie join us for our last chat. She came and was able to do a kind of a workshop style session with us and help us talk about applying the insights of the book, not just talking theory and ideas, but really say, Julie, you're the expert here. Help me understand, how would you apply this? How would you handle this scenario? And so you two brought specific situations that we workshopped with Julie. And I'd love to hear from you guys what some of the advice was that helped you out the most, or maybe some of the takeaways that you guys had from that experience of getting to work with Julie after having read the book and then putting her work into practice.
Oh, yeah, that was so helpful. It was like mind-boggling. You're reading her words and her thoughts, and then you get to talk to her and you become a case study. And we read about these case studies in the book, and then suddenly you're really invested in it, which is, it's kind of cool also, because just to get really meta, like, we're facilitating these learning experiences, and then when we're in the book club, we're also the learners, because we're coming and saying, teach me how to do this better. So it's kind of this beautiful, like, virtuous cycle that we were able to do. So I'll go through mine really quickly, because I had a couple that I wasn't sure which one would be most applicable for everyone. But something I was working on at the time was a corporate repositioning project. So our company was repositioning at the very highest level, kind of relooking at our value proposition, our strengths, weaknesses, doing a little bit of strategic analysis. And so I was brought in to facilitate a workshop on strategy with our VPs and the CEOs. And so even just starting right there, like facilitating the workshop with these people who have been here for so many years, who have a lot of experience, who have very specific opinions and very specific goals, and may be tied to their individual strategies. How do we unite everybody? How do we open the conversation up as well? So that they're not just thinking about their own functions, but they're able to think of the company as an entity. And so really getting into that motivations piece, getting into understanding the different elements of the Kamye analysis and, okay, what are the social forces here? What are the environmental forces here? What are their motivations here? How are they already acting, and how can we get them from point A to point B, and who's invested and who's going to be the one that you kind of have to like talk to a little bit more on the side to get them along. And so that really was important, that stakeholder analysis, really involving the learners sometimes all together, and then also sometimes one-on-one or in small groups, and building relationships on the side. Yes, to get the buy-in for the project, but also to garner trust. Like when Julie talked a lot about building those relationships, getting to know each other person to person, recognizing that we're not all just cogs in a machine, but we're individuals trying to come together and work towards a shared goal, kind of break down those barriers. Yeah, I know we all have different goals. We all have different quotas to hit and everything, but we're in this together, kind of. Not to be corny, but we are. And so that was really helpful. So that was something that I took with me in this project. I was able to create a whole new content system, tons of content assets with my team. We formulated some plans. We trained teams in stages. So something else that Julie had talked about was, again, the process of it and going through step by step and making sure that people are coming along with you on that journey. And so we trained teams across the company in small groups. We wanted to listen to them first and then to have them really have a hands-on experience with the new content systems and the content assets and the new way of talking about our company as part of the rollout process. And that was really, really helpful because it also opened our eyes to things that we weren't going to ever really realize on our own. We had to hear that directly from the learners. And then we were able to adjust the experience to tailor it to them a little bit more. And the other element was the maintenance piece. So after all of that, after we go through all the different types of values and different ways to unite and different ways to roll out the process, again, change is a process, not an event. So even after my quote unquote project for corporate repositioning kind of seemingly tied up together nicely with a little red bow, we still had to maintain that. We still had to keep the learning alive. We still had to maintain the usage of the content after the training sessions ended. And so I really wanted to focus on creating that culture of learning. And so that involved responding to questions readily, making sure that people always felt heard and had the ability to voice their questions and then trust that the answer was going to help them. Sending reminders every so often, because sometimes we just forget and it's easy to jump back to what we were doing before. We're creatures of habit. So sending some reminders, making sure that communication was constant, always available to them, always kind of going to them so they didn't have to do so much extra work there to remember themselves. And then reinforcing the correct process. So sometimes we get to close those legacy systems, get rid of the old stuff, archive it, curb the behavior, say this is the new way of doing it, but I want to make sure you still see the value. I want to make sure you don't have that high perceived risk still. I want to make sure you're still motivated to do the right thing. And we're going to empower you to make the right decision. We're going to force stuff on you, but it's available to you. And these are the reasons why you should use this. And here's how it's going to benefit you. Almost make it like you want them to wonder, well, then why wouldn't I do this, right? You want it to be so obvious and easy for them to make the right choice. But also the last piece was being open to adjustments. So once we did the process, we're maintaining, everything's going great. Thanks so much, Julie. Those tips were really helpful. Everything's really moving swimmingly, but it's never really over. You always have to be listening, be open to ways to iterate and elevate processes and continuously improve. And so her feedback on making sure that you weren't just maintaining something in too stale of a manner, but making sure you're always fixing it and listening because things are going to change and motivations are going to change, and always kind of maintaining that over time was also helpful. A good reminder of something to be cognizant of so that we're not just shutting the lid on this box, but we're always making sure that everyone's aware that this is something we always want to maintain and make sure that we're committed to excellence in this way, but we're not putting on blinders. We're open to making adjustments. So if someone sees some way that it could be better, we want to hear that. We don't want to stifle that. We don't want you to think that we know everything. We want to work together and make things better for everybody. So that was super, super helpful. It allowed that project to be successful, I think I could say. And then it's still a work in progress, of course. So we're continuing to maintain that. But the conversations with Julie and with the group were really, really helpful for me personally in just making sure that I was applying those lessons properly and thinking of all the different angles that I could along the way.
Yeah, a great example of what you said, that change wasn't an event, it was a process, and still is an ongoing thing that we work on. So cool. And then Kamye, if you wanted to share maybe some of your takeaways or insights from the scenario that we workshopped with Julie for you and your work.
Yes. So again, my scenario, supporting consultants and understanding and internalizing these various updates in 5 different sessions. I actually led session 2 last week, and that went smashingly well.
Yay!
And so thank you. So some of my concerns were, these are experienced consultants. They have lots of years of experience in education. And so I know they come with a lot of background knowledge. And so I did not want to bore them with just telling them, these are the updates. Now go forth. So didn't want to do that. And I also did not want to upset their elephant, because there are lots of updates that are coming down. And so I didn't want them to feel overwhelmed and start being really overly concerned about, like, what am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to understand and learn all this new content? So that's what I wanted to present to Julie. Like, how do I make sure that I'm not upsetting their elephant too much, that I'm making their elephant feel comfortable and confident with these updates and the support that they have with these updates, as well as honoring their experience. And so I got great advice that's been super helpful in honoring their experience, making sure that I'm giving them an opportunity to give feedback in regards to the updates, because they are the experts in this arena and they are going to be the ones who are going to be facilitating professional learning. So getting their feedback, not just presenting the updates to them, but letting them know what the updates are, and I'll get back to that, and giving them the opportunity to let us know, like, does this work? What are some areas of growth in these particular updates? Instead of me just telling them the updates, like, here are all the various updates for this session and this session, giving them the opportunity to explore. So giving them the opportunity to compare and contrast the current session 1, for example, to the updated session 1. And interestingly enough, I did get some feedback from stakeholders that they were concerned about presenting what we like to call, another colleague of mine came up with this term, we're in the very draft stage of it. So things are still being updated and revised. And so there was concern that the consultants would think, like, this is the final version, and so this is what I have to present on. And so I was able to have that conversation with stakeholders and letting them know, like, this will be advantageous to them because they are experienced, and we also want them to have the opportunity to explore the materials. Like, these are educators, like, they want to get their hands on the things. And so all that advice was really helpful. And I took that advice, implemented into the session 1 that was in November and session 2 that was just last week. And the feedback was so positive. They really enjoy the opportunity of going through the revisions, the updates at this current pace. They really like having the opportunity to share their ideas in regards to the revisions and suggestions that they have. I mean, we're getting lots of suggestions for what these revisions look like, how we can improve them. And the team that's responsible for those revisions, they have been really appreciative to me because I share the feedback with them from the consultants, and they're actually doing whatever that they can to embed and implement those updates from those suggestions from the consultants. So having that fireside chat was a huge game changer, because I was really nervous about, how do I talk to these very experienced folks in this space? Because I think oftentimes at least from my experience, there's so much effort in making sure that our more emergent learners, our folks who are not as familiar with the content, that they understand it, as opposed to, Kamye, you got 20 people who are very experienced with this content. Like, how can I put them in the space where they're receptive to the content and not feel like, oh, I know all of this already.
Yeah. And I love hearing the wins that you both had with, like, you just shared feedback in November and then feedback even right now with your second training that you did, getting that positive feedback from stakeholders and saying, okay, that was so helpful. And something that you guys both talked about that I think was a huge takeaway for me from our chat with Julie too, was that closing the loop of feedback and connecting with learners. Because she made a comment too of, well, how hard is it to talk with your learners? And I remember for me, I was like, oh, I could probably send them a quick message over Teams and get their feedback. And it's a small effort, but it's something that can make a huge difference. Like you were just sharing, Kamye, that sometimes you get feedback from the learners and you go, oh, that was much better received than I expected. Or maybe they share something that they don't love, but we're able to leverage that and use it to make the next round, the next training is going to be better as a result of that. So I love that you guys both shared some of those experiences of making that feedback loop with your learners, with your stakeholders, and saying, okay, how can I make sure that I'm meeting the needs of the people that I'm working with, and can I validate that? Can I hear from them? So love the wins that you guys had. And that was just seriously so fun to get to hear your guys' work experiences, workshop it, and then get to see it put into practice, see it actually come to life. It was like you said, Laura, the mini workshops that were hypothetical in the book almost came to life, came out of the pages, and we got to like actually work through it. It was so fun. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you both taking the time to both review your notes, share the thoughts that you had, and then also share your experiences implementing the insights and advice that we got from Julie from our last fireside chat. That was really a huge highlight for me, not just getting to read the book and share with others, but then also that workshop really helped put everything into practice, get a new perspective. And so for those listening, I would want to just invite everybody else to join us for the next time. Having chats like these are one of the best parts of a book club for me. And it's a lot of fun getting to hear different perspectives, different backgrounds, people from unique industries and with varying years of experience, working with learners in different positions. And so a huge thank you to both of you for sharing your expertise. And for those who are listening in and thinking, man, Laura and Kamye are just the absolute coolest people in the world. Where can they connect with you? What's the best way for people to catch up on your work, the things that you guys are doing? Where can people find you guys online?
I'm on LinkedIn with my first and last name, Kamye, first name, last name, Hugley, Hugley. So that's where I am. So you can check me out there.
Awesome.
Me too. I'm on LinkedIn as well under Lara Goldstone MBA. I have to say that because my maiden name was very unique, but it was Bacopoulos. And now my married name, there's a lot of Lara Goldstones. So hopefully you can see that I'm on there. But either way, I also have a blog at yourstoryhaven.com. So you can check that out as well.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to link your blog and both of your LinkedIns in the show notes for everybody. And for those that want to join us for the next book club fireside chat, we'll be reading, the next book is Designed to Engage by Beth Cougler Blom. And we'll be reading that for all of Q1 of 2025. So we'll be having fireside chats in February, March, and April. So it's never too late to join. If they want to come and join our group, would love to have anybody who's listening in who wants to come in and talk more about facilitation is what we're talking about with Designed to Engage. So if you're looking to sharpen your facilitation skills and want to be surrounded by sharp people like Kamye and Laura and our other members of the L&D Collective, I would just plug to be sure to check that out. And thank you again, Laura and Kamye, both of you, for your insights and for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
A huge thanks to Kamye and Laura for sharing their insights and experiences. It's one thing to read a book, but getting to apply its lessons in our work and discuss it with the community takes learning to a whole new level. As a reminder, if you enjoyed this discussion and want to be part of our book club, we're currently reading Designed to Engage by Beth Cougler Blom for Q1 of 2025. We have another fireside chat coming up on March 11th, And in April, Beth herself will be joining us for a special session. It's not too late to jump in. I'll leave a link in the show notes for anyone who wants to join the L&D Collective and be a part of these awesome discussions. I'll also link Kamye and Laura's LinkedIn profiles and Laura's blog, so be sure to connect with them and check out their work. And if you found this episode valuable, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, or comment if you're on Spotify, and share it with others. Thanks again for listening, and we'll talk soon.